Okay, here we are. We're in the library and we're ready to do some reading. We got a reading chair here. Got a nice couple of sconces here to keep it well lit. Got all my, you guys,
Hey.
you guys make sure you're bringing me books as soon as I get done reading. So go over here, you over here. You guys are on book duty. You bring me books as soon as you can. There we go. All right.
Okay.
Strap in, guys. Let's see if my reading voice is working. Whew, all right. So we're just going to read everything. I think some of these notes we would have already read before. But, yeah, we're just going to go through the list here. Is there any way to search or by type? There we go. Okay. So, first up in the reading list is this tattered note. Tattered note. The note is blood-stained and torn, and the edges are smudged with some kind of pigment. From the scraps that are legible, you can make out hastily written instructions. To avoid the entrance in the tower, traffic through my shop would attract the attention. Deerford may be sympathetic to our goals, but they wouldn't approve of a temple yet. Key to the entrance by the river, east of the town, but be careful on the road. Reports of these days. T. So that was back in the village, in Deerford Village, or whatever it was. All right, here's our first actual book. 10 Years of Dawn. All right. 10 years I tilled the vorless leaf. In 10 years I told myself that living in St. Widewin's footsteps would bring me rebirth. Each dawn I'd pray that if thou art in darkness, he shall bring thee light, and each night would bring the same emptiness. For my decade of living as a simple dye farmer, all I have to show for it is a great deal of purple clothing. Eothas has not spoken to us since he appeared as St. Widewin. It was my hope that Eothas would claim me as his next vessel, but alas, the child of light remains silent. Every day I practice the ritual of banishing the shadows of the unfaithful, and every day I work my fields in solitude, without sign of Eothas returning. If thou art in darkness, he shall bring thee light. But how long must I remain lost in this long night of abandonment? Is this my punishment for keeping my faith a secret? Is Eothas hiding from me until I shout my reverence for all to hear? Surely he must know that the Deerwoodens now hate him, and his followers. My countrymen are quick to blame all that was terrible about the Saints' War on those of us still faithful to Eothas. Should they not be angry at the Radsarish soldiers? Do the Deerwoodens not realize that to dismiss the god of rebirth and redemption is to prevent all hope of healing? As I pen these words, I know that I must continue to till the dye leaf. I will wake each day with hope. If thou art in darkness, he shall bring me light. Each day I will pray that the dawn stars visit me, just as they visited St. Widewin in his fields of Vorlis. Will they come to me as they came to St. Widewin? As a man and two women, luminescent and perfect? I am told they come to presage new times. I am told many things, and I struggle to find the faith to believe it all. And yet, each morning the sun rises in the eastern sky, and each morning Eothas illuminates my simple plot of land, casting away the shadows of the unfaithful in his golden gaze. I thank thee, Eothas, for all the springs I have had, and all that will come. I am in darkness. Please bring me light. 10 Years of Dawn. All right, next up, Abaddon's Hands. Of all the stories of all the gods, no doubt one of the most charming is the legend of Abaddon's Hands. In some cultures, Abaddon's hands are tiny, cheerful creatures that hide in the walls and in the cracks between paving stones. In others, they are silent men of stone who roam distant lands. In all such tales, however, they are Abaddon's constructs, built in his image, to continue his good work of creating strong and wondrous things in this world. Thus, upon spying a mighty mountain peak, or a row of Audra pillars, or another natural marvel, parents and nursemaids will tell young children that these are the works of Abaddon's hands. Such is the appeal of Abaddon as a deity, as it is through his legend that we recognize familiar shapes in the natural world. Thus, when we see a landform that resembles a colonnade or an arched gate, or a mighty home, we see a hand and a purpose at work that is not unlike our own. And while Abaddon's own identity as a construct is alienating to some, to many of us, his crude yet practical shape is comforting. While the other gods take the form of birds, beasts, and sea, Abaddon takes the shape of our most common tools and constructions. His debasement in a body of iron elevates our own works and labors, and it offers us grand hope. For if a god could rebuild himself out of iron, what wonders might Kith create with their own hands? Next, Admeth Hadrit, Part 2. Well, I guess we don't want to read Part 2 first. Where's Part 1? Do we not have Part 1? Now, hang on just a moment. There's not alphabetical. Can't do it alphabetical. Huh. Well, that's, I guess... Yeah, I mean, I'm pretty sure this is alphabetical, right? I guess we don't have Book 1. Well, that's a shame, ain't it? I think we've probably read all these journals, huh? We probably don't have to read these. I don't know. Well, I guess we'll read Part 2. We don't have Part 1. Oh! Oh! Haha! We found it. Good thing I looked over there. Admeth Hadrit, Part 1. Rise to Power. Oh, this is a long one. Oh, man. Little could one know that the man who once destroyed part of his own country with fire would become the Deerwood's most beloved leader. Martyred in the war he started to free his people from an oppressive rule, there isn't a Deerwoodan who doesn't know of or revere Admeth for what he did. Strangely, even though there are records of his father Edring's childhood, and even though he was raised in nobility in the Deerwood, while it was still a Deer territory, information about Admeth's early years is nearly impossible to find. Admeth is not known for his childhood, though. He is known for saving the Deerwood and uniting it with its sworn enemy, the Glenfathans. In 2652 AI, the Deerwoodan troubles with their Furconing were at a boiling point. Several of the earls under Edring's rule, provoked by the imperial court in Nadir, resumed looting the ruins around Deerwood and the Glenfathans held sacred. When the Glenfathans finally retaliated, it was overwhelmingly brutal and resulted in a slave uprising. Galvin Regd, whom Edring had fought before, resumed control of the Glenfathan troops. Regd was also able to convince some Delimgan to join the fight. Edring was, at this point, far too old to lead his forces into battle, so he sent his son, Admeth, in his place to contain the threat. Admeth, true to form, as the son of Edring, and obviously having learned tactics from his father, made a dangerous but effective tactical decision. In order to prevent Reg's troops from using the woods as cover, and to keep them from advancing through his lands, set fire to the forest at tributary of the Isuar River, and positioned his troops to prevent any of the Glenfathan forces from retreating. This tactic proved to be effective. While some Glenfathans and Delimgan were able to escape, thousands died. In the skirmishes that followed, Galvin Regd was captured and sent to be held in New Haemar. Admeth was able to do what his father spent decades trying to. He stopped Galvin Regd. The conflict with the Glenfathans continued for several months, and Admeth repeated the scorched earth tactic several times to flush the opposing forces from key battlefields. He was able to bring the conflict to an end. Before the year ended. While it was a win for the Deerwoodans, it was very costly as well. Because of his tactic, the conflict earned the name the War of Black Trees. After Edring's death in 2654, Admeth became the grief of Deerwood, due to dismay of the imperial court and the other earls. Over the course of the next year, they defied his rule at every turn, rebuked his decrees, and countermanding and countermanding his directives. In 2655 AI, Admeth had enough, so this was a year later. Even though he lacked support from most of the earls, he was admired by both the Vailian dukes and all the common folk. Backed by this support, he issued an ultimatum to the Fyrconing to anoint him a grief palatine. The Fyrconing, unwilling to deal with a rebellion while trying to establish a new Vorless trade in Radceris, agreed. Admeth then held authority and legal power over the earls, their holdings, and their titles. The Deerwood was no longer a griefrum, but instead was a palatinate. Palatinate? This change reduced the Fyrconing's power over the region. With his new power, Admeth quickly brought the rebellious earls into line, but in exchange for the power, Admeth invested time and money into all of the Deerwood's ports and trade posts, dramatically increasing shipping traffic. This helped the earls and brought in more money for the Fyrconing. Alright, so started off as a brutal military leader and then became a promising politician. Alright, part 2. Also a long one. Over the 5 years following his ascension to grief, Admeth attempted to mend relations with the Glenfathans and bring his lands together with theirs. He enacted laws that restricted the taking of new slaves, allowed Glenfathans to buy their fellows out of bondage, and imposed a tax on slave ownership in order to promote the use of free labor. While there was some resistance to these new laws, the Fyrconing's attention to Radceris and Admeth's power, backed by the colonists, made it difficult for the earls to truly resist what was happening. In 2662 AI, in the year of the 10th anniversary of the War of Black Trees, Admeth brought about the end to slavery in the Deerwood. He negotiated a series of treaties with the Glenfathans, wherein a timeline was established for the official emancipation of all remaining slaves. Each owner would receive compensation in either land or money based on the number of slaves freed. If they didn't comply, the slaves would be seized and their former masters would suffer a substantial fine. In return for this, the Glenfathans opened trade routes with the Deerwood and allowed Deerwoodans to live in and near areas that had their sacred ruins, but they are and allowed Deerwoodans to live in and near areas that had their sacred ruins, but they are, under no conditions, to enter the ruins. As a final act of goodwill, Admeth freed Galvin Regd, saying he had suffered sufficiently for his actions. The Fyrconing, seeing he was completely out of control in his own palatinate, devised a plan to get the supply of ancient artifacts running again. He approached the earls suffering under Admeth's rule and convinced them to hire agents to raid the ruins. Initially, they did so in secret, but they quickly became sloppy, eventually being caught. This breach of the treaties incited Glenfathans again to act in violence, while Admeth researched who was behind it. With help of the Glenfathan leaders, Admeth found evidence that pointed back to the Fyrconing as the source of the raids. That was the beginning of the end for Aediran rule in Deerwood. Over the next 7 years, Admeth and his Fyrconing maneuvered around each other, playing political, economic, and military games in order to gain the upper hand. In 2668 AI, Admeth declared the Deerwood had had enough. The Fyrconing would no longer be recognized. The Deerwood was now a free entity and would govern itself. This started the War of Defiance, which lasted 5 years. The end result of the war was freedom for the Deerwood, and though Duke Hadrit would never live to see it come to a close, the people of Deerwood consider him the founder of the country, nevertheless. Good for you, Admeth Hadrit. Alright. Aediran dialects. Oh boy. This is going to be an interesting read, huh? If I was in a library, this would not be the first book I'd pick up. The sun does not set on the Aediran language. Those of us who commune with this proud language, or some derivation of it, populate every corner of Eora. Most of us who speak this wonderful tongue know it as Aediran, but scholars and those obsessed with correctness often qualify it as modern or contemporary Aediran. This is to contrast the language you and I speak today with Eld Aediran, the old Elven language that was spoken in the Adirian Empire back before the pioneer settlers of the Dyrwood built their longships. If Eld Adirian could be considered the mother of the living Adirian, the language of Hylespeak could be seen as Adirian's cousin. Hylespeak is fading from common use, but many of the elves, especially the older ones, in the Adirian heartland still use this dialect. Whether you know it or not, if you can read these words, you can understand Hylespeak. It is almost identical to Adirian, but includes a large vocabulary of archaic words that have fallen out of use in today's Adirian. When you hear bards sing old Adirian poems, there are often lines of chorus that sound like melodic nonsense inserted to complete rhymes. They are usually instances of words that are lost from our common language but still used in Hylespeak. While Hylespeak is familiar to speakers of so-called modern Adirian, the same cannot be said of our language's predecessor. Eld Adirian is a dead language, spoken by academics but not used in any major community. Eld Adirian's words are often familiar to Adirian readers, but the words use orthography that has since been abandoned. Unfamiliar accent marks abound. For example, Eld Adirian contains some diphthongs that have no place in modern Adirian, as well as a few tricky consonant clusters. EA creates an Ea sound that sounds like the colloquial salutation Heya. Eo sounds like Ao. The sound is still used in the modern word Aora. EY is pronounced as AE, such as in Wraith. Okay. UE and I forget how to say that one, but that one both create long O sounds, as in loop. Y sounds like a E, sounds as in B. Okay. GJ sounds like the consonant Y, as in U. SC sounds like the sh or the SH or sh. So you'd pronounce scop like shop. Okay. CG sounds like the DG sounds like G. End of a word like hedge. Okay. It is not uncommon for given names of Adirians, Dyrwoodens, and Red Sarens to come from Eld Adirian. Some examples. Aldwin is pronounced Aldwin because of the long vowel sound on the Y. Dernisk is pronounced Dernish, since the final S or SC cluster sounds like an SH sound. So this one is going to be pronounced Yister. So Yister is pronounced as Yester on account of the JJ or the GJ consonant cluster. This word is pronounced as sledge. Thirsk is pronounced as Thirsch. Okay. I'm not going to remember any of this. This word is pronounced Ushgrim and not Uskgrim. Okay. And then this one is pronounced Ingmar, leading with a vowel sound. Okay, Ingmar. This is actually a really fascinating read. I love languages, I really do, but I'm terrible at them. I've tried studying languages so much, I'm really bad at them. The only one I got, I don't even want to say okay at, but the only one I had any success with was French. But I've pretty much already forgotten all of that. Damn it. All right, next up, Adir customs. Adir is a country rich with custom, and they are known for their strict adherence to them. Their customs run the gamut, from grand celebrations like the Feast of Feasts to mundane superstitions such as ways to avoid Zvef addiction. This volume will focus primarily on bigger celebrations, as no one knows how to throw an extravagant party quite like the Adirians. The Feast of Feasts. The biggest and most important of all Adirian customs is the Feast of Feasts. This week-long celebration happens the first week of Fonestu, Deep Summer, and is dedicated to honoring the life of the first Fyrconing. Each day of the week is devoted to some aspect of the Frokoning's life, and there are very specific dishes to be served at each meal. The Feast of Feasts originally began as a festival celebrating the birth of the Frokoning's first son, and soon became a yearly occurrence during the week of his birthday. Currently, Adirans simply use it as an excuse for a party and pull out all the stops in an effort to outdo the previous year. Unless you wonder, as I did, which Frokoning is honored during the Feast of Feasts, it is always the current Frokoning. For each Frokoning is the first and only Frokoning. Alright? Sweet Treat. This is Halloween. A special custom that arose at some point during the Feast of Feasts, Sweet Treat started as a way to keep children occupied so their parents could dine in peace. While it is still used for that today, significance has been added to it. Each treat is placed in a container, usually small metal boxes, and hidden somewhere on the property. It's like an Easter egg hunt. After everything has been hidden, the children are sent out to find the treasures. It is said now that the hidden treats represent Glamfathan artifacts, and the children are the explorers, bringing the riches back to their new and rightful owners. A little bit of racism in your your kids' games, and that's great. Carnival of the Mask. When the original colonists for Adir traveled to the new land to found the Deerwood in the name of the Adiran Frokonig, they encountered the Glamfathan people. The Carnival of the Mask celebrates this meeting. Originally, it was merely a formal reenactment, as a play, of the tensions between the Glamfathans and the Adiran settlers, but it has since evolved into much more than that. Participants choose sides and come dressed in elaborate outfits depicting which group they have decided to align themselves with, Adirans or Glamfathans. Everyone attends a masquerade ball, and this party replaces any semblance of the play that was presented. That obviously the actual celebration doesn't, but the events that led to the celebration reminds me a little bit of like an American Thanksgiving sort of thing. Not exactly, but I can imagine maybe they were inspired by Thanksgiving to an extent. All right, Winter's End. Winter's End was never anything more than an excuse for a celebration, and it hasn't changed in all the years it has existed in Adir. It takes place during winter dusk and lasts all 3 days. People use the time to reflect on the year, celebrate their lives, and remember the dead, especially those who have passed in the recent year. Oh, that's a nice one. That's a nice one. We need more holidays. I think every day should be a holiday, right? Who needs to work? Animancy in the Modern Age. God damn, we have not read like any books yet. Okay. It's going to take forever. Oh my goodness. Animancy is a science, both respected and reviled, sometimes by the same person. For all the research done on the topic, we still know so little. Control over life itself. Something animancers have been working toward for hundreds of years. There are no real records of how the practice of animancy was first discovered, but once the spark of knowledge ignited, there was no stopping its inevitable discoveries. In 2260 AI, animancers, as a result of their extensive research, successfully contained and transferred a soul. The subject of the experiment, whose name is unknown, was young and wealthy but infirm. The idea was to move his soul from the dying body and into that of a recently deceased man who had suffered an accident. The new body, bearing only slight decay, would house the soul, giving the man a much better life. The outcome of this experiment resulted in the condemnation and outlaw of animancy in the Adiran Empire. Again, while we have no true records of what happened, as they were all destroyed after animancy was outlawed, a journal was discovered, a makeshift confession by one of the participants. Excerpts from that journal follow. 2260 AI, from Prima 16th. It is done, and the gods forgive us for our arrogance. I'm not sure what I was expecting, certainly not that. But what did any of us expect? I don't know, what did you expect? Still behind the revulsion, there is a sense of pride, something I can't deny. All the research, the studying, everything we worked for. We thought we'd change the world. How it's changed. All was in place, the twisted form lying on the table next to its new vessel. The equipment has been prepared, the tinctures and potions all carefully crafted. Every detail painstakingly organized to ensure success. We most assuredly succeeded. The procedure went exactly as it should. The soul, extracted from the body, held, bound in place to prevent it from moving on. The next step, transfer to the fresh vessel. It was beautiful and terrifying. I listened as they spoke the words of binding. I watched the soul move, not the soul itself, of course, but the vapor we used to detect it, as it lowered into the vessel. A gentle luminescence covered the body, and then nothing. Silence. Darkness. I held my breath, afraid that even the slightest disturbance would destroy all our hard work. Then motion. Then, dear gods, then blood. How did I survive? I do not know. The vessel rose from the slab, and the room breathed. Every person crowded around the table exhaled, seemed cheered. We had made life from death. We had become eternal. The body closed its eyes and tilted its head, looking for all purposes to be listening for something, or to it. Then its eyes popped open, and it moved. Its lips peeled back from its teeth in a horrible expression of fury. It fell on the nearest man, tearing his throat, knocking him to the ground. Then the room erupted into screams, shouts, and a flurry of bodies running, pushing, doing everything in their power to get away from the creature sitting on their colleague. But right before that happened, in the split second before the chaos, when there was nothing in the air but a stunned, terrified silence, I heard it, sitting there on his chest, face at his neck, and it was feasting. Damn animancers. Alright, Baratheon Scripture. Have we read this one? I think we might have read this one. Behold, thou faithful, the visage of thy transformation. Fear not the journey when the portal opens. Become one with the wheel, and glad heart and cheerful countenance. For the doorway shall open for all in their time. Neither the rich nor influential, neither kings nor rulers, neither strong nor powerful can escape its embrace. Barath will usher thee through the doorway, and thou wilt return to life, thy mortal life begun anew. There goest the cycle, there goest life. There thou goest also. Thou shalt approach the door, and the inevitable shall approach thee. Do not turn back on the portal. Do not turn back on new life. Walk the path and welcome change, or face the night, for he walks the road with thee and will guide all to their destination. Thou mortal, the skull thou wilt become. Thou closed off, the key thou shalt turn. Thou sealed, the threshold thou shalt cross. A lot of thous and these in there. Makes it sound much cooler. We had not read that one. I think we read Skane's scriptures. We read one of the scripture books, but I think it was Skane's maybe. Book of the Hunt. When my students asked to be taught the ways of Galawain, I tell them they have already failed. Does one ask a deer to present itself as dinner? Of course not. One must outwit, outmaneuver, and overpower the deer if one dreams of venison. So it is with the secret god. To ask a question is weakness and idle decision. To seek answers is to understand and to become one with Galawain. Survival begins with strength from within. I think we've read this one. We have read this one. We read that one to figure out how to pray to Galawain all the way back in Twin Elms. Club of Refined and Prestigious Gentlemen. Guest book. The names scrawled in the guest book span pages of the thick tome. Dionysus, Toro Magnef, Gakken, Barghest, Balden Og, Captain Repeat, Duson, OSK, Hakuroshi Kama, CG Refugee, Rogue Menace. Are these backers or something? Ankthorin, Vile Loner, Zed, Volreth, Zinklot Darkstone, Thesio, Mithridates, Kaelston, Circumprimus, River Musique, Bulgul, Maris Maglfar, Caleblum, Calebronx, Mike Hager, Kazgar, Anawar, Hamsteer, Guar, Vander Kirchhoff, Aldbaran, Arid, Ithro Merlin, Braktash, Fenrir, Carnwellis, Taoma Mente, Charles Cleric, and Restim Nemotatop. Alright, that was an easy one to read. Daily affirmations of focus and efficiency. We have 6 of these. Jesus. Number 1. All errors can be reforged into lessons. Abaddon rebuilt himself from ruin. No setback is insurmountable, not even death itself, so long as the soul is dedicated to the task. Number 2. Work hard, work well. Abaddon demands only honest labor and forthright service. All errors can be reforged if your first intentions are pure. Number 3. All ignorance can be reforged into knowledge. Master your craft, excel at what you have been trusted to do. Do not offend your teacher by remaining a student forever. Each generation, number 4, each generation must forge its successors. Teach your trade to all who are willing to learn, and in so doing, multiply the fruits of your knowledge. Number 5, all difficulties can be reforged into triumphs. Meet strife with humility and acceptance. Let adversity temper the ingot of your will, and your will never shatter. And you will never shatter. Number 6, embrace your station. Fulfill the duties of your rank, and meddle not in the affairs of your betters. All guilds fail at their weakest link. Number 7, all loss can be reforged into strength. Profitable work heals all emptiness. So long as you have the tools of your trade, you will always be able to forge wealth anew. Number 8, value the works of others, and they will value your works in return. Share the harvest with the hungry, and your tools with the destitute. And number 9, all souls can be reforged into whatever we will. Hard work is not exclusive to life. Death is no time for complacency. Commit yourself to excellence in this cycle and the next. So that's like an Abaddon thing, it seems like. Okay. Next, development of a Crucible Knight, Part 1, lower ranks. How many parts do we have? Oh, we just have Part 1. I'm surprised we don't have more books. Maybe we had to like steal some of these books. All right. Oops. Let me have a sip of water real quick. I wish we had some music here. It's a bit of a shame that we can't hear music playing while we read these. In recent years, the Knights of the Crucible have evolved as a group. No longer concentrating solely on blacksmithing or combat training, they adjusted their focus to help initiates develop their souls as well as their bodies. From initiation, there is a well-defined path to the top of the order. You start as a squire. When a candidate shows sufficient prowess in blacksmithing, or recently, at least the drive and potential, he is accepted into the order as a squire. Once he is part of the order, training begins immediately. Lessons are divided into 2 main sections: body, commanded by the Lord Marshal, and soul, overseen by the Grand Crucible. At this point in their progression, the only uniform the squire is allowed is a simple cloth uniform displaying the knight's colors. Next is the Novitiate. After sufficient training, each squire is given a 3-part test. He must repair a broken piece of armor, he must recite the Canticles of Abaddon from memory, and he must be able to land a blow on a novitiate in combat. If he succeeds at all 3 of these tasks, he is promoted to the position of novitiate. At this point, he is given his first official piece of Crucible armor, a brigandine. His training now doubles, as only the most valiant of candidates make it through to the next level. Justiciar and Templus. When a novitiate shows he is ready, decided by his teachers and trainers, he must make a decision. His training and advancement from this point on will focus on one of the 2 disciplines, body or soul. Novitiates that choose body continue military training as a justiciar under the Lord Marshal. Novitiates that choose Soul are given clerical training as a Templus under the Grand Crucible. Justiciar or Templus, the newly appointed, is taken through the ritual of the arm. He is given his plate armor and symbol of Abaddon. He is then taken to the smith's forge, named after Abaddon, and is tasked with forging a small nail out of iron. He affixes this nail to his armor under Abaddon's symbol, and will wear it there for the rest of his life as a Knight of the Crucible. At this point, the knight's training is fixed. If he choose body, that is the path he is on until the end of his days. If he choose soul, there is no deviating from the course. That is why the choice is only presented after he has been through many months of training. That's really cool. So this is obviously before they did the whole soul reading thing, or lineage reading, which is nice. Cool. 1 second. Let me just make sure recording's going all right. It is. Okay. All right, so we've made it through 1 line of books. Oh man, 1.5 line of books, I guess. I know we've definitely read this book, The Final Journal of Jonas, so we don't have to read that one. That's good. Edring Hadrit. So this is Admeth's father. Edring Hadrit is, in retrospect, led a remarkable life, but his contributions would probably have gone largely unnoticed if it weren't for his conflict with the Glenfathan Orlin by the name of Galvin Regd. Though Edring became a great man and a well-respected leader, his early life was uneventful. He was born in Adir of noble parents and spent a good part of his childhood there. While he was raised apart from the common folk, he felt a connection to them and was known to always be welcoming to any and all. In school, he demonstrated incredible intelligence, frequently arriving at correct conclusions using his own methods of getting there. He was always doing unexpected things, and though he seemed to be paying attention and would pass his lessons, his teachers and trainers were certain he would never amount to anything. His family moved to the Deerwood as colonists while he was still 18. The moment they docked in the new land, Edring knew he had found his true home. He explored the land, getting to know it and its people as well as he knew the castle in which he lived. He grew into a man who was well respected by all who met him. He took over the earldom, becoming a fair and much beloved leader. Under his leadership, Belreach thrived, becoming more stable and prosperous than anyone thought possible. When a new grief was needed, the people's voice was unanimous. Edring Hadrit. As his first act as the new grief, the Freconing instructs Edring to build a new city for him, a seat of power in the Pearlwood Gulf. The Pearlwood Gulf. The city is to be called New Dunrid, and will serve as the capital for the new colonies. Not long after he assumed power, the Broken Stone Wars began. It was a quick and brutal war, and taxed the limits of Edring's capabilities. He had never before encountered someone as organized and brutal as the opposition commander, Galvin Regd. At first, Regd's tactics confounded Edring, but Edring, who grew up developing unorthodox ways to take care of his problems, adapted quickly. This did not stop Galvin Regd outright. However, he began a campaign of terror that lasted for 2 more years. Edring, who expressed a sort of respect for Regd's prowess, studied his techniques, learning how Regd attacked and devising a way to counter it. He gave the earls and thanes instructions that confounded and sometimes infuriated them, as they seemed to leave their lands open for attack and put their people at risk. Edring disseminated lies and half-truths about the plans, imperial events, and military maneuvers. No one knew what truly was going on except for Edring and a very small contingent of trusted friends and advisors. His tactics worked, and Edring's men started to catch the Glenfathans off guard. It wasn't long before Edring's men were able to anticipate Reg's moves and cut him off at every front. When asked how he was able to overcome an enemy that anticipated every move, Edring responded, "That is how he was able to outwit us. Our moves were transparent. Anyone could see through the standard tactics. Spread something out thin enough, and you can poke a hole in it. I countered an unpredictable enemy with unpredictability." Because Edring was able to counter Reg's plans, the conflict eventually died off. Regd sent a message to Edring expressing respect for his tactics and prowess with military maneuvers. This political and military stalemate led to the first treaties signed between Glenfathans and the Deerin colonists, who would eventually become the Deerwoodens. Awesome. That book felt very much biased, I will say. It made Edring sound like a really, really good and great person, which I guess is probably the point of it. All right, Eric Glenfath, Part 2, Conflict and Unexpected Alliances. We don't have Part 1. That's a shame. I suppose it could be in somebody else's inventory. Do we want to check? Not really. I mean, I'll check if I can remember. I'll check when we switch people, but I don't think... I know for a fact all the DLC companions have empty inventories. So I don't think we have Part 1 of this. All right. In 2652, everything started to deteriorate. It was uncovered that a number of ruin sites had been looted, and all signs pointed to the Adirans breaking the treaty. Glenfathans held off judgment for as long as they could, but when the evidence became overwhelming, they retaliated with all the strength they could muster. Regd once again took up the mantle of leadership and led his people against the Adirans. I guess this is nice. It's kind of like it's kind of like a continuation of Edgar Hadrit. Just we're looking at the other side, maybe. Instead of facing Edring Hadrit again, this time Regd crossed swords with Admith Hadrit, Edring's son. Admith proved to be just as, if not more, capable than his father, and used a tactic no Glenfathan expected. In order to clear out the battlefield and ensure there would be no place for troops to hide, Admith set the entire force on fire near the Isk-Uar River and blocked all retreating forces with his army. While some escaped the slaughter, most of the Glenfathan troops died. Regd was captured in the mayhem and transferred to New Hamar for holding. While many more battles occurred, some of which resulted in Admeth using the same tactic, the Glenfathan forces were now disorganized and had lost their resolve. They were easily routed, and by the end of that same year, the War of the Black Trees, as it is now known, was over. In order to again repair relations between the two groups, Admeth introduced new laws restricting the taking of new slaves from Ir Glenfath. The laws also gave Glenfathans the opportunity to buy their fellows out of bondage. While not entirely happy with the prospect of having to buy their countrymen, who had already been free, the Glenfathans took this gesture as the goodwill it was and ceased the hostilities again. 7 years passed with Deerwood under Admeth's rule. The Glenfathans felt, for the first time, that true peace could return to their land. The peace led to what is likely the biggest treaty negotiation between Ir Glenfath and the Deerwood in its history. Admeth set into place the 10 Years Treaties, so named because it had been 10 years since the War of the Black Trees. A timeline was set, and at the end of it all, Glenfathan slaves had to be released. The citizens of Ir Glenfath watched the Deerwood with a cautious hope. With the extended peace between the two peoples and these new treaties, they truly hoped conflict was a thing of the past. In 2665, Galvin Medra, an elven woman who had taken over for Regd, brought news to Admeth. Some Deerwooden people were found taking artifacts from the tombs. Initial investigation uncovered several more that had already been plundered. As they seemed to be isolated incidents, it had been stopped early, Medra did not want a war to start again, after so long being at peace. Admeth was grateful for this courtesy, and wasted no time tracking down who was responsible. Medra gave Admeth use of her Brishogwyn mind hunters, and with their help found evidence pointing directly back to the Furkoning Admeth and Medha, now jointly allied against the Adiran Furkonig, used everything at their disposal to prevent the Furkoning's agents from getting into the ruins. 3 years later, in 2668, when Admeth declared independence from Edir to create the free Palanate of Deerwood, the Glenfathan stood behind him, offering their support and troops. While the war didn't affect the Glenfathan people directly, there were casualties. In the end, the Deerwooden people became free, and the bond between the two people was strengthened, though through their shared suffering. Admeth became the beloved as ruler of the Deerwood, known and respected by Deerwoodens and Glenfathans alike. Good. That's a good thing. Eothesian Prayer. I'm pretty sure we've done this one. Maybe not. We'll read it. And the sun shall break through the darkness, and new dawn arriving with the rebirth of the day. Rejoice, all ye who dwelt in the shadow, who are broken and beaten. The winter soon comes to an end. Spring shall rise, bringing light and life to the world. Radiant light, radiant life, and thy soul shall find warmth in his arms. All creatures bask in his glory. The rays of his countenance bathe the world, bringing an end to the night, ushering in the day. Kneel before him, and wonder at his benevolence. Feel the warmth of his radiant presence. If thou art broken, he shall make thee whole. If thou art in darkness, he shall bring thee to the light. If thou art sinful, thou shalt be reborn. If thou art cold, his warmth shall bolster thee. How canst I, so lowly and worn, speak words of proper adulation? Thine eyes, whose gaze sees the sin in me, yet still shows love. Thine hands, whose grip pulls me out of darkness. Thine ears, listening to my every prayer. Thine heart, bright as the dawn, giving me warmth when I am raw. Eothas, light of spring, sun of the world, thou givest me life and purpose. If thine heart be black, if thine intention be impure, thy life is forfeit. For he hath seen, he can see, he will see. Nothing is hidden from his glory. His light touches every corner of the world. Nothing is hidden from his sight. If thou doest thy work in the dark, if thou wouldst keep thine actions hidden, thou shalt be burned in the sun of the new dawn. Day comes soon. Prepare for the dawn. Nothing is hidden from his reach. Eothas is a cool god. I like him. All right, excerpts from the Sermon of Struggle. Choice is a luxury. We earn through peace. Struggle is our fundamental nature. Even when our war banners sit idle, mankind foments strife. Friends argue with fists. Lovers kindle jealousies. Merchants compete with lies. Wherever mankind goes, struggle follows. Magrin is goddess of fire and war, not bloodshed and conquest, though many in Red Saris would tell it differently. How bitter they must be that Magrin's priests were able to destroy a god made manifest. How bitter indeed. We who worship Magrin are not addled barbarians or cloistered mystics. We are soldiers, armorers, watchmen, and bodyguards, artisans of conflict and protectors of our families and flags. We do not salivate for battle. We view war as unwelcome, but struggle is our fundamental nature. We do not pray for strife. We pray for wisdom to resolve it quickly. We do not wish for war, but when it inevitably must be fought, we find divine ecstasy in discipline, efficiency, and excellence. Magrin, guide us to the battle that is just and fair. Let us be your fire that burns away the profane, leaving only the righteous. If struggle is our fundamental nature, let victory be our inevitable state of grace. Nice. I like that one. We have read this one, so we can move on to Galvin Regged. And we get a lot of information about the conflicts between the Deerwood and Ir Glamfath. Alright. Galvin Regged. Mention the name Regged in Ir Glamfath, and you'll be told stories of a glorious freedom fighter, an Orlan who used his tactical savvy and battle training to protect the Glamfathan from the encroaching evil of the invaders in the Deerwood. Ask someone in the Deerwood about him, and you'll hear angry retellings of the exploits of an underhanded, dirty fighting Orlan who terrorized Deerwooden citizens. This conflict is what legends are built on, and Galvin Regged is the stuff of legends. The Broken Stone War began from a misunderstanding between the Glamfathans who lived in the Deerwood and the Aediran colonists who were moving in. Tensions were already high between the two groups as the Aedirans claimed land the Glamfathans said they already owned. Add to it, the Glamfathans taken and forced into slavery by the Aedirans, and it was only a matter of time before someone snapped and sent the two groups to war. There was the occasional skirmish or fight between isolated groups, but no real conflict until the Broken Stone War. Whether intentional or not, Aedirn farmers clearing land for their crops, knocked over and destroyed one of the ancient menhirs that dot the countryside. The Glenfathans, who revered the ancient structures in the Dyrwood, reacted swiftly and violently, led by a particularly fanatic Fang by the name of Regd. While the war was short-lived and the Glenfathans were ultimately not victorious, Regd and his forces were able to eliminate a significant number of colonists. After the war ended, Regd was appointed the Galvan, or leader of the Glenfathan tribes. His leadership skills and prowess in battle earned him the respect of all the tribes in Eir Glenfath. Because all the tribes were unified behind him, he was able to move and coordinate their warriors in a way that organized them into such an efficient team. The Aedirn colonists lived in fear of his next attack. His name and reputation spread through both lands. Over 2 years following the Broken Stone Wars, Regd and his forces, using deception, misinformation, and straightforward guerrilla tactics, killed hundreds. The remaining earls send word to the Fyrkoning, saying something must be done before more nobility is killed. But Regd continued to terrorize the colonists, and it seems the campaign will never end. That is, until he encountered Edring Hadrit. Yep, good old Hadrit. Alright, next, Glenfathan Customs. That's a long one, huh? I have another sip of water before we begin. Alright. Glenfathan customs can seem primitive and unsophisticated to some, but all customs begin with a ritual or superstition, so why should theirs be considered less than any other? If they are examined closely, Glenfathan celebrations stem from a deep and rich culture, and all tie to their history in a significant way. The Festival of the Ancients. The Festival of the Ancients takes place during spring dawn, and is a time to celebrate the Glenfathans settling in Eir Glenfath. It is a simple 3-day ceremony that is mostly centered on feasts. These feasts are set up around the ruins scattered through Eir Glenfath. Wreaths made from tree branches and flowers are placed at the ruin, and prayers are said to the gods, thanking them for health and prosperity. The Cleansing. The cleansing started as a protest, recreating the hardships wrought upon the Glenfathans by the Aedirn colonists when they started settling the Dyrwood. It has morphed over the years and is now used more as a game mixed with a teaching tool to inform your Glenfathans about the history of their people. The cleansing takes place on New Year and Mid-Year, and now acts as a metaphor for real events, instead of a recreation of the events themselves. Zarup effigies are placed throughout the forest, hollow clay shells filled with sweets and gifts. The children then search the woods for the effigies and destroy them, cleansing the forest so the Glenfathans can move in and occupy the area. After the area has been cleared, they gather for a celebration and feast with their elders, tell the young members the true story of their people's history. Alright, Holiday of the Black Tree. A combination of a day of remembrance and celebratory feast, the Holiday of the Black Tree is held on the second day of autumn falling, when the trees are still colorful but losing their leaves, and the land is becoming cold and dark. Glenfathans use the day to tell the story of the War of the Black Trees and remember those who were lost. During the morning, the adults hang elaborate garlands from the tree branches. The garlands are made from red, orange, and yellow flowers and represent the flames that swept through the forest of Eir Glenfath, destroying everything in their paths. After a morning of fasting and reflection, the children are set to run through the trees, tearing down the garlands and bring them back to the feasts, decorating the tables with wildflowers, turning the horror of the war into something beautiful. Then they eat, cheering the peace they now have with the Dyrwooden people, and toast to many more years of peace to come. Also of note in Glenfathan culture is their abundance of traveling customs. Being a semi-nomadic people, they practice customs to ensure their safety while on the move. Traveling customs. If you are taking a quick trip, purchase a gift for someone you are visiting and leave it at your home. If something important is left undone, such as giving a gift to a loved one, you will always return to finish the task. If you are taking a longer trip, leave remembrance of your trip. No matter how well you know the road, drop some pebbles along the way or tie ribbon to tree branches. Mark your path away, and you'll always have a safe and easy trip back. Evil spirits and dangerous creatures are everywhere in our world. If you decorate your cart with masks, they will scare away any danger that might otherwise approach. But you must decorate your cart anew every time, or every trip. I think that's maybe every trip. Or the evil won't be fooled by your ruse. That's interesting. I like those customs. All right, where were we? Right here. Missives of the Hand Occult. Dearest brother, or was it sister, may this letter find you in well spirits. A man of thuggish bearing stormed into my library the other day and demanded I help him find a book on the construction of an arquebus. I thought it proper service to whale to steer this man toward an illuminated manuscript on the subject of whittling toy soldiers and other miniature props. Unamused by my solution, I shrugged and said, "What is an answer without a question?" He did not find my spiritual rhetoric helpful or amusing, and so he punched out 2 of my teeth. I trust your summer has been less tumultuous than mine. In more important news, my apprentice claims that she saw the eyeless face in a dream the other night. I admit, I was so mad with envy that at first I refused to believe her. Well, forgive me for such a lapse of judgment. She described an amoa of brilliant blue hues with a featureless face surrounded by a swarm of eyes. No 2 eyes alike, she claims. Whale ignored her questions, and she can't recall any specifics of what was said. In fact, my apprentice seems to have forgotten many things since before the visitation. She could not tell me where she grew up or what she liked to eat. At first, I was so envious of her for having seen Whale with her own eyes, but it seems Whale's visit was to conceal, not to illuminate. I pray she endures this test of faith and can look back at the events and feel the joy of mystery. What is an answer without a question? Last week, I felt the solution was ignorance, but after Whale's visit, I feel a road without length is closer to the capturing the riddle. I worry my apprentice will look back at her visit from Whale and feel cheated, robbed of some moment of clarity we all thought we were owed when we first joined. I tried to tell her she was lucky, but she was too young to understand. What is an answer without a question? May I be dead and my soul scattered to the winds before anyone knows for certain. All right. Monsters of the Deadfire Archipelago. This one will be a fascinating read, considering we're getting close to going there. Oh, man. This might take 3 hours. Jesus. All right. The archipelago winds its way between the Great Eastern Ocean and Restless Ocean. Hundreds of small islands in the midst of the water. Few dare brave its treacherous rapids, and fewer still have returned to tell tale of their adventures through it. Travel between the 2 oceans is virtually impossible. Great storms hammer any ships foolhardy enough to attempt to navigate, and this alone should be enough to deter anyone from attempting the voyage, as untold ships have gone down, tossed against the rocks. That doesn't sound very promising for us, does it? The weather and treacherous rocks are only a precursor to the actual horror of the archipelago, the terrors of the deep. No one knows how many creatures stalk the oceans, waiting for unsuspecting sailors to drift into their waters. But we do know of some. Alright. The Barbed Ravager. Oh, we do get music sometimes. I thought I was hearing it occasionally. A giant shark that is known to ram passing vessels, trying to knock sailors off the deck and smash a hole in the hull. It has tremendous spines protruding from its side and back that are presumed to be poisonous. The largest sighted Barbed Ravager, with survivors, was estimated to be about 30 feet long. Jesus. The Winding Serpent. Smaller around than the Ravager, but potentially longer, the Winding Serpent attacks in small packs, usually 3 to 8. They have long, sharp heads, somewhat reminiscent of a barracuda. Like the Ravager, they repeatedly slam the side of a ship hoping to crack a hole in it or knock someone from the deck. They have also been known to swim to the depths and shoot out of the ocean, landing on the deck, coiling and winding their way around, snapping up any crew that they can before plunging back into the ocean. Alright, we've got the Leviathan. Imagine the largest whale you've ever seen. The Leviathan is at least 10 times that size. By the time a ship sees a Leviathan, it is already too late. As they rise from the depths, the water around them begins to spin and sink, creating a whirlpool. The Leviathan's body surrounds the hapless vessel, preventing escape. And as it goes down, the enormous mouth opens, pulling all aboard to their watery depths. Yeah, that's not good. A Pulpavir. All the creatures you've read about in this book are nothing compared to the Pulpavir. Barely the size of a man, but they lack in size and strength they make up for in numbers and terrifying viciousness. Their lower halves are a mass of tentacles, like an octopus or squid, but more numerous. The tentacles are long, black whips with suction cups on their underside and small thorny barbs on the top. The sheer number of tentacles gives them frightening speed when walking on land, pulling themselves forward almost as fast as a running horse. While they vaguely resemble a human from the waist up, any extended examination proves how wrong that assumption is. Long, stringy black hair falls from the top of their heads to cover a face taken directly from a nightmare. A wide, gaping mouth cuts across the bottom of its head from ear to ear, full of wicked dagger-like teeth. 2 large round eyes are sunken into its head, black as coal, shining with the malevolent fire. A small antenna protrudes from the middle of its forehead, ending in a small nodule that can glow with an eerie blue light. One can imagine a sailor on the deck of a ship at night, looking out across the black water, blood freezing as countless lights appear beneath the surface, rising toward him as the Pulpavir swarm upward. Because they seem to be more octopus than man, they can collapse in on themselves, fitting into spaces no person should be able to. The smallest crack in a hull, the slightest separation between board offers them entrance. Oh, Jesus. It is not unknown for them to slaughter an entire crew from hold up to deck by infiltrating the ship from underneath. Fortunately, they do not seem to have spread too far outside the archipelago, but there may come a day when the Pulpavir attacks become commonplace. Oh boy, that doesn't sound good. I don't want to go to the archipelago. Those monsters sound terrifying. Can we not?